whilst during the briefing sessions for head teachers and senior leaders we didn't cover assessment and progression in a lot of detail, I thought it would be helpful to run through the guidance provided on the Curriculum for Wales website, just to signal some important features, if you like, of the policy, and then expected behaviours as we move forward. In terms of the introductory section, the content's obviously listed here on the left-hand side of the page. In terms of the introductory section, I think one of the most important paragraphs or statements is the one that I'm highlighting here on screen. The guidance details those aspects of assessment that we intend to be statutory for schools, as well as those aspects to which schools will have to have due regard when planning and designing their school curriculum. These should not be conflated with activities that contribute to external accountability and national monitoring. Information gathered through individual learner assessment is for use within schools only, and should not be collected or published by any external body or party. So this is consistent with existing Welsh Government policy, which means that we don't now aggregate this data at a local authority or a regional level, and very much firmly roots assessment in terms of its formative purpose in supporting learner progress through the curriculum, and that being its intended purpose as we move forward, uncoupling the link then with perhaps the high stakes accountability that we've had previously with the previous policy. So what we then have is a section that says how to use this guidance, and again one of the key statements in here is the one I'm highlighting on the screen. The principles of progression are supported by descriptions of learning. We've looked at those when I discussed the humanities framework, which provide more detailed guidance on progression in each area. These descriptions articulate what it means for a learner to progress along the continuum and provide reference points for the pace of that progression. So again, making the link there between the progression framework and how we should start to think about assessment. Some additional information here in terms of providers of non-maintained nursery education and EOTIS pupil referral provision, and that basically there's going to be some additional guidance issued to those providers in 2021, which will support the implementation of curricula in those settings from 2022. And then we move into really the key principles of assessment, which underpin thinking about assessment within the curriculum. So what we have here are 6 sort of key principles. So we have the learner at the centre, the 4 purposes. We know that the Curriculum for Wales is about realising the 4 purposes in young people, and then the assessment arrangements have been designed in order to support that aim. So the purpose of assessment is to support the progression of each individual learner across the continuum of learning. Learners are at the heart of assessment and should be supported to become active participants in the learning process. Assessment is an ongoing process as part of teaching and learning. A shared understanding of progression developed through professional dialogue is integral to curriculum design, improving learning and teaching. So the idea here is that we should be working collaboratively in schools and across schools to support our thinking about assessment and progression. Learning across the breadth of the curriculum should draw on a wide range of assessment approaches, so thinking about where it's most appropriate to use aspects of summative and formative assessment to support learner progress. And engagement between the learner, parents, carers and practitioners is essential for for learner progression and well-being. And there's a section later on that looks at the role of the various parties, the various stakeholders in developing that. So when we move then into the purpose of assessment, it's basically there are 3 key roles that are identified through the assessment guidance. The first of these is to support individual learners on an ongoing and day-to-day basis. So the first section here, assessment should focus on identifying each individual learner's strengths, achievements, areas for development, and if relevant, any barriers to learning. So that's the first key purpose of assessment in this curriculum. Identifying, capturing and reflecting on individual learner progress over time. So in this case, Assessment should support practitioners identifying the progress being made by an individual learner and recording this where appropriate to understand their journey over different periods of time in a variety of different ways. And the third purpose of assessment is the understanding group progress in order to reflect on practice. So in here it states that assessment should also enable practitioners and leaders within the school to understand whether different groups of learners are making expected progress. So identifying strengths and areas for improvement in both the school curriculum and on daily practice. So the idea there is that we are making sense of the progress of different groups of learners across the school. So those are the three key purposes of assessment as set out in the curriculum guidance. Guidance then provides a very brief overview of the fact that currently we've got external qualifications that will be developed at the end point of this curriculum. So for learners who are currently in Year 4, who will be studying a new suite of qualifications from 2025, which are the natural end point of this continuum from 3 to 16. And obviously Qualifications Wales at the moment are carrying out a number of consultations to support the development of those qualifications. What the next section then talks about is who needs to engage in the assessment process, so who are the key stakeholders in the process, and sets out the roles of different groups and individuals. So in terms of our school leaders, it's crucial that, for example, we won't go through all of these, but as an example, we are creating an environment based on mutual trust and respect, rather than one focused on compliance and reporting. So it's about creating the right culture for the development of this sort of formative approach to assessment, enabling practitioners to develop the knowledge and skills necessary to carry out their role in assessment effectively. So a very strong signal here around ensuring we've got effective professional learning in place to support practitioner understanding of formative assessment and how that we can develop that through our practice. As we head down through the list, another, I suppose, key aspect here is ensuring engagement between all participants in the learning and teaching process in order to develop effective partnerships. So both within colleagues, within schools, with parents, with clusters of schools, geographic clusters, to ensure that smooth transition across the 3 to 16 continuum. When we look at the role of practitioners in the assessment guidance, we've got some very clear guidance in terms of how we should approach assessment. So, for example, sharing intended learning appropriately with learners, so making sure our sort of learning intentions are clear. Evaluating learning through observation, questioning and discussion as part of our day-to-day practice, and providing relevant and focused feedback that actively engages learners, encourages them to take responsibility for their learning and moves learning forward. So really what this lists here in terms of practitioners is what constitutes effective formative assessment in the classroom. There are also some additional points then about working with colleagues within school to make sure we've got a clear understanding of progression, and involving parents and carers in that process of dialogue around the progress of their children too. In terms of the learners themselves, there are some key roles here in terms of the assessment process. So it's trying to ensure that learners understand where they are in their learning and where they need to go to next, and also have a sense of how they can get there, what are the steps that they need to take in order to improve the learning, and how do they actively respond to the feedback provided by their teacher to improve their learning, and obviously to be involved in that review and reflection on their learning as well. In terms of parents and carers and external partners, obviously there are some roles set out here as well, in terms of, for example, engaging regularly with school in order to understand and support child's progression in learning.